If you've watched any of the earlier episodes on this channel, you've heard me use the word brief, not prompt. And if you've been using Claude AI for a while, you probably came in already using the word prompt. This episode is about why that difference matters, not as a terminology debate, but because the word you use shapes how you think about what you're doing, and how you think about what you're doing shapes the quality of everything Claude AI produces for you. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly what separates a prompt from a prompt brief, why the distinction is the single most important shift in how you use Claude AI, and what it looks like in practice across real professional tasks. Before we get into it, two things in the description worth having. The brief, 1 page, is free, the full framework on one printable sheet. And your first week with Claude AI at work is $20, a 5-day structured guide from first prompt to working system. Links below. The word prompt has a specific history in the AI world. It comes from the technical side, from researchers and developers who were experimenting with language models and needed a word for the input they fed the system. In that context, prompt made sense. You were prompting the system, pushing it, triggering it, giving it a signal to produce output. The word implies a command, a push, an instruction. That framing has leaked into how most people think about using Claude AI. They think about it as, what do I type to get Claude AI to do what I want? The prompt is the command. Claude AI is the machine that executes it. And that mental model is the source of almost every underwhelming Claude AI experience people have. Because Claude AI doesn't respond to commands the way a machine does. It responds to context the way a colleague does. Here's what a prompt looks like in practice. Write an email about the project delay. Summarize this document. Help me prepare for my meeting tomorrow. These are prompts. They're instructions. They tell Claude AI what to produce, but nothing about the situation it's producing it for. No context, no audience, no objective, no tone. Claude AI will produce something in response to each of these, and what it produces will be generic, because it doesn't know anything specific about your project, your document, or your meeting. It fills the gaps with assumptions, and generic assumptions produce generic outputs. This is the experience that leads people to say, Claude AI is fine, but nothing special. They're using prompts, and prompts have a ceiling. The word brief has a different history and a different implication. In professional life, a brief is what you give to someone you're working with when you need them to produce something. A creative brief, a legal brief, a design brief, a project brief. A brief is not a command, it's a handover. You're giving someone everything they need to do the work well. The context, the audience, the objectives, the constraints, the tone, so that what they produce actually fits your situation rather than a generic version of it. When you brief a consultant, you don't say, write a report. You explain the business context, the stakeholders who will read it, the decision it needs to support, the tone that works for this organization, and what success looks like. The consultant uses that context to produce something specific and useful. Claude AI works exactly the same way. It's not a machine that executes commands. It's a reasoning tool that responds to context. Give it a command, it guesses. Give it a brief, it understands. This is where this channel coins a term that we use throughout everything we teach, the prompt brief. Not a prompt, not a brief in the traditional sense, a prompt brief. The thing you type into Claude AI that bridges the language you already know with the approach that actually works. A prompt brief is what you write when you treat Claude AI like a capable colleague you're bringing up to speed on a task. You give it the situation, you tell it who the output is for, you explain what it needs to accomplish, you specify the tone and any constraints. It's still typed into the same text box, it still looks like what most people call a prompt, but the way you think about writing it, and therefore what you include, is completely different. A prompt asks, a prompt brief equips. Part 1. The 6 elements of a strong prompt brief. A strong prompt brief covers 6 things. You don't need to use them as a checklist. Once this becomes instinctive, they're all just part of how you naturally describe a task. 1. Role: who you are or what role you're writing from. I'm a senior project manager at a professional services firm. This gives Claude AI the perspective to write from. 2. Audience: who the output is for, not just a job title. What do they know? What do they care about? What's their relationship to you? This goes to our 8-person operations team. They're experienced, they want clarity, not hand-holding. 3. Context: the actual situation. What happened? What's going on? What does Claude AI need to know to understand this specific task rather than a generic version of it? This is the most important element, and the one most people leave out. 4. Outcome: what the output needs to accomplish, not just write an email. I need this email to acknowledge the delay, explain the cause without sounding defensive, and reassure them we have a plan. 5. Tone: how it should feel to read. Professional but warm. Direct and factual, no fluff. Collaborative, not apologetic. 6. Constraints: length, format, anything specific. Around 200 words. No bullet points. This should read as a letter. Include a clear next step at the end. Let's put them side by side so the difference is completely clear. The prompt: write an email about the project delay. The prompt brief: I'm a project manager at a 40-person consulting firm. I need to email our client, a financial services company, to tell them that a key deliverable is delayed by 2 weeks because of a resourcing issue that's now been resolved. I want to acknowledge the delay, take responsibility without being overly apologetic, explain that the issue is fixed, and reassure them we're back on track. The relationship is good, and I don't want to alarm them unnecessarily. Professional and direct, around 150 words. Same task, completely different outputs. The prompt produces something that could have been written for anyone, about anything. The prompt brief produces something that sounds like it came from you, about this specific situation, for this specific client. That's the difference, and it's not about typing more words for its own sake. It's about giving Claude AI the context it needs to do something specific rather than something generic. Here's the mental model shift in plain terms. When you write a prompt, you're thinking, what do I want Claude AI to produce? When you write a prompt brief, you're thinking, what does Claude AI need to know to produce this well? That shift from what you want to what Claude AI needs changes everything about what you include. Because what you want is a good email. What Claude AI needs is the situation, the audience, the objective, the tone, and the constraints. The people who get the most from Claude AI have made this shift. They don't think of themselves as giving commands to a tool. They think of themselves as briefing a colleague, giving them everything they need to do the work well. Part 2. The prompt brief in practice. 3 task types, 3 examples. Task type 1. Writing. Prompt: write a proposal for a new service. Prompt brief: I'm a partner at a small management consulting firm. We've been asked to submit a proposal to a regional hospital network for a 12-week operational review of their patient flow processes. The CEO mentioned their biggest concern is emergency department wait times. They've had negative press recently, and the board is applying pressure. Budget is tight, and they'd be resistant to anything that looks like a long engagement with uncertain outcomes. Our strength is that we've done similar work at 3 comparable hospital networks with measurable results. The proposal should open by demonstrating we understand their specific situation, present our approach clearly, reference our track record, address the timeline and budget concern directly, and close with a clear next step. Confident and specific, no generic consulting language. Around 800 words. The prompt produces a generic proposal template. The prompt brief produces an argument specific to this client, their concerns, and your strengths, something you could actually submit. Task type 2, summarising. Prompt: summarize this report. Prompt brief: I'm an executive assistant preparing a briefing for my CEO before a board meeting tomorrow. This is a 30-page industry report on supply chain disruption. My CEO needs to walk into the board meeting understanding the 3 most significant findings, the 2 biggest risks for our sector specifically, and 1 question the board is likely to ask that she should be prepared to answer. She has 10 minutes to read the briefing. Keep it to one-page executive summary format, no jargon. The prompt produces a general summary of the report, probably covering everything in proportion to how much space it takes up in the document. The prompt brief produces a briefing that's specifically filtered for what your CEO needs tomorrow for this meeting with this board. Same document, completely different output. The difference is context. Task type 3, thinking through a problem. Prompt: help me think through a difficult conversation with my manager. Prompt brief: I'm a mid-level operations manager, and I need to have a conversation with my director next week about taking on a new project that I don't think our team has the capacity for. My director is enthusiastic about the project and has already committed to it with senior leadership, so I can't just say no. I need to raise the capacity concern in a way that's constructive, proposing solutions rather than just problems, without looking like I'm being obstructive or not a team player. The relationship with my director is good, but she's under significant pressure from above right now. Help me think through the key points I need to make, how to frame the capacity issue constructively, and what solutions I could propose that might make the conversation productive. The prompt produces general advice about having difficult conversations. The prompt brief produces specific preparation for this conversation, with this manager, in this context, navigating these specific dynamics. If the prompt brief produces so much better output, why do most people default to prompts? 3 reasons. First, habit. The way people type things into search engines has trained them to be brief. Short queries get results. The muscle memory of search carries over to Claude AI, even though Claude AI works completely differently. Second, uncertainty about what to include. If you don't know that role, audience, context, outcome, tone, and constraints are the things that matter, you don't know what to add beyond the basic instruction. You don't know what you don't know. Third, underestimating how much Claude AI can do with better context. People who've only ever used prompts have never seen what Claude AI produces with a strong prompt brief. They think the generic output they've been getting is Claude AI's ceiling. It isn't. The ceiling is much higher, and a prompt brief is what gets you there. Here's the test we introduced in episode 3, and it's worth repeating here because it's the fastest way to know whether what you've written is a prompt or a prompt brief. Read what you've written. Then ask, could someone who had never met me, never worked in my organization, and had never dealt with this specific situation produce something genuinely useful from this? If yes, you've written a prompt brief. Claude AI has what it needs. If no, you've written a prompt. Something's missing, usually the situation, the audience, or the objective. Find the gap and fill it. Run that test on your next 5 Claude AI interactions. You'll immediately see where you're defaulting to prompts without realizing it. Making the transition from prompts to prompt briefs doesn't happen all at once. Here's how most people do it in practice. Week 1, you start with what you'd normally type, then ask, what's missing? Add the most important missing thing. Usually that's context. What actually happened? What's actually going on? Notice what changes in the output. Week 2, you start thinking about the 6 elements before you type. You don't use them as a checklist, but they're in the back of your mind as you write. You notice when you're leaving something out, and you add it. Week 3 and beyond, it's instinctive. You just write differently. The prompt brief is your natural mode, and every Claude AI output you get is better than anything you were getting before because the context is richer. The shift takes about 3 weeks of deliberate practice. After that, it's just how you work. One more thing worth covering: how prompt briefs work inside Cowork, Claude AI's dedicated workspace. When you set up a Cowork project with a strong project context, your role, your organization, your audiences, your current priorities, you're doing the brief work once at the project level. Every task you bring to that project starts with all of that context already in place, which means your individual task briefs can be shorter because the standing context is already there. You don't need to re-explain who you are or what organization you're in every time. You just brief Claude AI on the specific task. This is where the prompt brief compounds into something even more powerful. The project context does the heavy lifting on the permanent elements. The task brief handles the specific situation. Together, they give Claude AI everything it needs, without you having to type it all from scratch every time. One last thing on the language itself, because some people ask whether the word brief versus prompt actually matters, or whether it's just semantics. It matters. Not because of the word, but because of what the word implies about your relationship to Claude AI. Prompt implies you're operating a machine. You push a button, the machine responds. The machine does what it's told. Brief implies you're working with a colleague. You give them what they need to do the work well. They bring their capability. Together, you produce something better than either of you would alone. Claude AI works like the second thing. The professionals who get the most from it have figured that out, consciously or not. Naming it makes it intentional, and intentional is always better than accidental. Here's your challenge for this episode. Take the next 3 tasks you bring to Claude AI, whatever they are. Before you type anything, run the brief quality test. Could someone who doesn't know your situation produce something useful from what you're about to write? If no, add what's missing. Role, audience, context, outcome, tone, constraints. Not all 6 every time, just the ones that are absent. Do this 3 times. Notice what changes in the outputs. That's the whole exercise. 3 prompt briefs, 1 shift in how you think about Claude AI. Everything after that is different. Part 3. What's next on the channel? Here's where things stand and where the channel is going. The first 6 episodes built the complete foundation. Brief framework, 5 mistake fixes, professional briefing scenarios, first workflow, career positioning, and client-facing work. This episode bridges the language gap that was creating confusion for new viewers. The Start Here playlist is running in parallel, a chained learning path for absolute beginners that takes you from zero to a working Claude AI system. The Absolute Beginners video is live, and the Beginners video is next. After that, the Workflow series, role-specific episodes that take the architecture from episode 4 and build it out for specific professional contexts: project management, legal, operations, finance, marketing, solo operators, and the deep dives, long-form, specific scenarios, complete Claude AI workflows for defined professional situations. Subscribe. Tell me in the comments, what's the task type you most want to see a prompt brief example for? That shapes what we build next. Let's recap. A prompt is a command. It tells Claude AI what to produce. Claude AI guesses at everything else, and generic guesses produce generic outputs. A prompt brief is a handover. It gives Claude AI everything it needs: role, audience, context, outcome, tone, constraints. Claude AI can now produce something specific because it understands the situation rather than guessing at it. The shift from prompt to prompt brief is the single most impactful change you can make in how you use Claude AI. Not a new feature, not a new tool, just a different way of thinking about what you're doing, and therefore what you include. A prompt asks, a prompt brief equips. Quick reference: the 6 elements, the test, and the mindset shift. Screenshot this. The 6 elements: role, audience, context, outcome, tone, constraints. The test: could someone who doesn't know my situation produce something useful from this? The mindset: you're not operating a machine, you're briefing a colleague. That's everything you need. 2 things in the description. The brief, 1 page, free. The 6-element prompt brief framework on 1 printable sheet, including the brief quality test. If you're going to do the challenge from this episode, print it and keep it open. Your first week with Claude AI at work, $20. The 5-day structured path from first prompt brief to fully operational workflow. Day 1 builds the brief framework. Day 3 gives you 5 professional task templates. That's your starter brief library. Both links in the description, via Claude for Lawyers on Gumroad. Same creator. That's episode 7. A prompt asks, a prompt brief equips. 3 tasks, 1 test. 3 weeks. Everything after that is different. Serious skills, actual output, every time. See you in the next one.